folks in here that maybe getting off work or starting their evening a little later. We may have a few more straggle in too throughout the night. I know a couple more I've talked to today that maybe make it in here. I wanted to welcome everybody. For those of you who don't know, I'm David Smoke. I'm our town administrator. I got Gary Palmer in the back, our assistant town administrator, and most of you know Mark Shipley, our interim planning director. We've been working on something called architectural design guidelines now. It's been a priority of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for the last 3 years. In 2011, they put it in their strategic plan. I don't know if you've ever seen our strategic plan. It's we've got a lot of, pretty good document here. The boards were really hard on the strategic plan. It's on our website, townfarragut.org, if you ever want to go check it out. But part of that strategic planning process, we talk about what our goals are for the community, what we want to get accomplished as a community, what our 1 year are, our 5 year goals, our 10-year, 15-year vision for the town. And the board really worked hard in getting to that point. One of the things that we've talked about is the fact that Farragut, although we have developed into this great community and have some really good buildings throughout town, we really don't have any kind of standards in place for architectural elements for commercial, office, multifamily, residential. We have great things when it comes to landscaping and site plans. Our planning commission does a great job with that. Our visual resources review board does a great job with our sign ordinance and enforcing that. But when it comes to storefronts, that's something that we haven't gotten into the business of regulating yet. So we started down the process. Come on, wait. We started down the process in 2011, and in 2012, we started with some workshops, just trying to educate the Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen on what design standards are. We talked a lot about town center districts because you may or may not know, but we actually do have a town center ordinance that has specific language in there about how we want our buildings to look in that district. Now, we don't have that district in any zone right now, so there's nothing you can see or touch or feel with that in place. But if it ever does come into place, it'll have a distinct look to it. But for any other commercial areas outside of that, there's really nothing there right now that we can enforce. So we had some workshops. We actually had an ordinance that we were going to put through to the board, and it got tabled at the board level in June of 2012. Mostly we were looking at what you didn't like, and I think what we saw what people didn't like seemed to us would be metal, a lot of metal type buildings, or made of metal. But that didn't go very much further. So we took a step back. We finished up our land use plan at the end of 2012. That land use plan, for those of you that worked on it, which many of you here in this room did, it talked a lot about aesthetics. How do we make our community different? How do we make our community unique to those around us? And part of the aesthetics goes back to what we just have been talking about, architectural design standards. So in this year, when I got to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, our workshops for our strategic plan for this year, one of their high priorities was to work on architectural design guidelines. We wanted to see how far we can go with that and where we need to start. So why is everybody here tonight? We got you here. I think it's maybe the first time we've got all 4 groups together: the Planning Commission, the Board, the VRRB, and a couple of EDC members, Economic Development Committee members. But we got y'all here because we need your feedback. We need you to help us as we start this process. Our job as staff is to put out a request for proposal to different design firms that would be interested in helping us through this process. And you can go from very simple, very objective ordinances and regulations that are, you either meet the requirements or you don't, or you can go all the way to very subjective ordinances and regulations that have very specific design standards, what you're looking for in a community. Think about the places you've ever traveled, places you've gone, you drive in them, and you just say, this is a different place that I've just entered. I use the example a lot because I grew up in Atlanta, going north on Georgia 400, all of a sudden you run into the mountains in Helen, Georgia. And those of you that have ever been to Helen, Georgia know that you go there and it's like a Bavarian village. I mean, everything there, you see the McDonald's has a certain look to it. All the hotels have a certain look to it. You think you're back, somewhere else in time, but you're not. You're in North Georgia. So You can go that far with your design standards, or you can just say, you know what, we like really modern buildings, or we just like certain buildings to be made a certain way. So again, the reason we're here tonight is to get your feedback. We've got, I think many of you may have filled out a visual preference survey that we passed out online. Gary's going to talk about that in a little bit. I'm going to turn things over to Mark, because Mark's worked really hard on getting together a PowerPoint presentation to kind of go through some of these elements with you tonight. The only way this is going to be successful, though, is for y'all to give us your feedback and to have a real good discussion about what direction you want us to go in. And after this, you probably won't hear about it again for a while as we go back and try to do our work and get an RFP together. But once we get our design firm in place, I know we'll have more of these public discussions about how we want to proceed forward. So with that, I'll turn things over to Mark.
Don't like the idea of taking perks behind me. You behave. I just kind of quickly put together this PowerPoint presentation. It's basically the intent is to give you an overview of what architectural design standards are. What can we do in Tennessee legally? What are some of the communities that are doing these kind of things? And then to show you a bunch of pictures to kind of get some discussion going. Certainly anytime during this presentation that you want to ask a question, please feel free to do so. David kind of alluded to some of this in his introduction, but why do communities consider architectural design standards? I'm not going to read all these, you can see them, but it's basically to make a community unique, to provide some consistency and compatibility of the built environment, to actually protect people's investments. I think that's really key. Where you have predictability, you have kind of consistency of expectations. You're protecting people that invest millions of dollars in a community, and therefore protecting the economic base of the community. And then to enhance the marketability of the community. When you have a community that's visually appealing, it's a place that people want to live and work typically. There's lots of different things that go into architectural design standards. Some of them are obvious, like materials, color, building form, the scale of buildings, but there's also the side accents that are really important, that without those, you can have a very attractive building and you still can have a less desirable looking site as a whole. Also, where the building is placed on the lot and its orientation, I think are really important when looking at architectural design standards. In Tennessee, just from a legal perspective, I hear people ask me all the time, well, you can't do that in Tennessee, or the actual real law for architectural design standards is that it can be applied to any non-residential property, multi-use, say it's apartments, residential type property, and entrances to non-residential property. You cannot probably legally apply it to single-family detached residential. You can apply it if you're a municipality, but you can't in most counties. So this is a list of the towns that I'm aware of that do currently have some form of architectural design standards. When you look through this list, quite frankly, many of these communities are ones that I think are desirable and appealing. That's probably why they're on this list. So there's lots of communities that already have adopted architectural design standards. Now the next several slides, I'm just going to go through some pictures. Some of of these I took on a recent vacation up in Gettysburg, so they're a little bit different type of buildings than you would see kind of in Farragut typically. And just kind of point out different types of materials, what makes a building attractive. You can see that the building on the left has a cornice along the top. I guess most of you all know what that is on the roof. But there's kind of a decorative roof line basically to add some visual interest, whereas if that just continued straight flat, it would be a much less attractive looking building, probably for most people. The building on the right doesn't have any roof treatment. It does have some nice landscaping. It does have a lot of windows, but no real, window treatment. So there's probably some things that could be done with the building on the right. Here's very different types of buildings with all different kinds of materials. Stone type building in the upper left. And again, feel free to, ask questions or if you have any comments, jump in there. But really, these are just intended to get get you thinking about how a building looks. What is it that makes a building attractive or unattractive? We want to get your feedback from all these slides. The building in the lower left has some step-down facade, which if it were just continued in kind of a square pattern, it would, I think, be much less appealing visually. That's obviously not a building for everyone, but it's kind of unique looking. Upper right is a new McDonald's. I'm sure you've seen these all over the area. In my opinion, they do a lot of good things with these buildings. There's a whole lot of architectural variety, various types of materials. You got different types of canopy treatment there. There's a lot to be said for their new style of building, in my personal opinion. The lower right, you got again a mixture of materials, some variation in the height of the building. You got some canopy interest there, building on the left, and lots of window area. The building on the left here in this picture has some dormers up on the roof. I'm sure everybody knows what I'm talking about there. Some gabled dormers and some faux windows, fake window, to give it a little variety and interest. If they didn't have that, you'd have kind of a sea of asphalt shingles there to look at. So it's these little things that I think, when you're looking at architectural design standards, you need to think about. It's not just the material, it's not just really the style of the building, it's the accents too. Building on the right, for example, has got some, I think, some nice canopy accents. It's got some nice landscaping in the front, some varied facade, both horizontal and vertical, across the front, so it's not just a bland, straight frontage, different materials, different colors. This slide shows that, where a community has adopted design standards, international companies like Aldi, a German company, when they come to the community, the first question they ask typically are, can we see your design standards? Can we see your zoning ordinance? They just want to know what the expectations are, and they will build to those expectations. Because they deal with, various different communities throughout the world in their case. And even a drive-in restaurant, like on the right, which is a challenge in terms of architectural design, you can do some things to make it look more appealing. That's probably the best looking drive-in restaurant I've ever seen. Is that a Sonic?
Yeah.
Wow. Is that in Collierville?
It is.
Okay. That's, for that type use, that's about as good as it gets, I believe. Big box type buildings are a challenge, as you might expect. Building here, the same building, different viewpoints. On the left, this kind of shows the importance of using landscaping as an element to break up a building, particularly a large building. Helps soften it. You don't have any windows or doors in this portion of the building, so it can, without these kind of treatments, have a huge kind of wall effect, that may be undesirable. On the right, they've added a lot of different patterns to their facade to give it some visual interest, whereas if it was just a continuous brick wall, I think it would be, not as attractive, not as appealing. But they don't have any landscaping.
Mark, does banding mean that it's just several different things together?
Yeah,
Is that what that
just providing different layers of different materials to give it a visual kind of.
Oh, I thought maybe
linear.
banding was a technique, but it's not. It means
It
that they're
may
all
be.
together. Okay.
It may be. I'm not an architect, so I don't. I just use that because it's what it looks like to me, when I look at it.
Well, they used that word in one of the pictures earlier, and I was gonna stop and ask you then, but we've already gone
I've
through
seen
it.
it referenced as banding, where you just use different types of materials. Sometimes you turn a brick a different way.
Okay.
It's just, here you've got at least 3 different types of materials on the same building face. That gives it, kind of some variety. And again, the intent of doing something like that, particularly on a big box building, is to just to break it up so that it doesn't look so overwhelming, make it more pedestrian scale, instead of just a big sea of brick or whatever material the building's primarily made out of. A lot of these pictures, quite frankly, were just outside the town, the North Shore Town Center, where I think they incorporate a lot of good things over there. They probably got some things they could do better, but that's the case with anywhere. The building on the left has a little bit of decorative lighting, some canopies. This is obviously not the primary side of the building for the view, but it's still not unattractive. On the right, we've got a lot of windows, but the building, to me personally, this looks kind of boxy because they don't have any treatments along the roof or the windows, and it's just all brick. It's just kind of a box looking building. And that's something to think about if you proceeded with looking into architectural design. It's not just, you can't just say if you make it a brick building that it's going to solve your problems. You got to look at all these things, the accents, how it, the facade, insets and offsets and things like that, the roof line. Again, this is McDonald's. They do a lot of good things with these buildings. They may not be appropriate in all areas, but for what they are, they do incorporate a lot of different architectural design standards. Here's an example kind of side by side. These are Gettysburg. The building on the left, mostly brick, but it really is kind of a little thin. And you can see that the advantage of having some window treatments, buildings on the right, where they've kind of, done some accents with the windows and the roof line, to me is more visually appealing than the building on the left, which is kind of a boxy look. You can see the arched doorway on the building on the right there. It's kind of a neat accent. Some more examples of using windows and making the windows actually very appealing, very aesthetic. Using planters is a good thing sometimes. Here's, again, some arched windows. notice up top there. Building on the right's got a lot of good features, but it does have kind of a rather possibly incompatible looking awning when you compare it to the rest of the building. Another big box, and they incorporate a lot of things in this building, mostly brick. Got the faux windows, they've got some variety in the roof line. You've got blasters along the front there to give it kind of a columns here on the front, give it some visual interest, landscaping. Lots of good things that they've incorporated into this building. Kind of make it look less large than it really is, and give it more of a pedestrian scale. These are some more examples from Gettysburg, use of planters. Building on the right, it's color and kind of somewhat visually compatible, but there's a kind of large elevation difference, and that's something you need to look at when you're doing architectural standards too. That you don't want to have that much variety of elevation probably. The sign is also a little more typical of maybe not that particular location. It's not quite compatible with, that's actually part of the historic district of Gettysburg, which is a little surprising. Also, you can see the HVAC unit on the roof right in there. And, it's those little things, you know, that the town really does, I think, a really good job with, as David said, a lot of the site stuff. HVAC unit screening, loading dock screening, landscaping, generally signage. If you didn't have those measures in place, you would end up with something potentially like that, because that probably meets the requirements that are in place. Else you wouldn't be able to do it. When you're looking at architectural design standards, you really probably ought to look at all elevations of the building, because people's view of the building can change over time as development around that site changes potentially. So, you know, you've got kind of in these two cases, more or less blank walls with no landscaping. You can see the satellite dish, HVAC units. Here's a couple more examples in Gettysburg. Believe it or not, the one on the left is at a major intersection right before you go into the historic district of Gettysburg. And that I don't understand, but it's, I'm sure it's grandfather, it's probably been there forever, but, you know, it has no landscaping. The context is critical when you look at architectural design. Intersections, corner lots are really critical. A lot of the ordinances that I've looked at have a real focus on, some of them don't allow, for example, you know, gas stations at major intersections. Because what they're wanting to do is promote a building, not, you know, an automobile, not parking lot, gas pumps. They want you to see the beautiful architecture as you're coming into the community. So a lot of community, a lot of ordinances I've looked at actually don't allow those kinds of uses at on corner lots. On the right, they've got some good elements there, but the building's really out of character with the surrounding. As David alluded to earlier, metal buildings are a little bit of a concern. We don't have anything in place right now that would prevent either of these to some degree being built. We landscaping, and maybe because I like dealing with landscaping, you've got some VRRB people here. I think you can have the most beautiful building, meet tons of architectural design standards, but if it's poorly landscaped, you've got, less than optimal site. And you can take a average looking building, if you very nicely landscape it, you can, make it a lot more appealing. These are some examples, just outside the town, North Shore Town Center parking lot. They've done a very good job landscaping in their parking areas. This is actually the back of the McDonald's on the right, very nicely landscaped. I don't work for McDonald's. I don't come across as saying this is the prototype we need to give up. They do a lot of good things for what the building is. We have a ton of beautiful buildings in the town to be proud of. Renaissance, of course, they incorporate tons of these elements of good architectural design. Very attractive looking building. The Kroger building, for as big a building as it is, if they had come in and just built a blank straight wall of brick, it would have been much less attractive than what they ended up doing. These offsets, insets, got some roof line interest, the canopies kind of neat looking, and they've got some landscape planters in front of the building to kind of soften it up. Some other examples, and again, we've got lots of good buildings in the town. We've been very fortunate that vast majority of the buildings that are built here are excellent. And here you can see on Parkside Drive, upper left corner, you've got the faux windows, cornice, some interesting canopies, some inset offsets along the facade. Very attractive looking building. Really all of these, the Ingalls building, huge building. But it has a lot of, variety across its frontage that makes it look smaller than it actually is. And it gives us visual interest. I think they did a great job with that building. So we've got a lot to be proud of with what we've got here. As I mentioned earlier, we do look at what the building is proposed to look like. We look at building elevations, materials, and colors. When site plans come before the planning commission, we can make recommendations and have made recommendations. We had the Walgreens, for example, at the corner of Bixby Chapel and Parkside Drive, Camp Station Road there. They agreed to change their prototype to the brick building that's out there now to match Sam Issue's building behind it. So, we've had a lot of cooperation, people wanting to build something that looks good. We've had that through the planning commission. We do a very good job, I think, with some of the detail stuff, like screen, loading docks, dumpsters, HVAC units. We did a lot of that with the Costco building, for example, to help soften, lighten the impact on the adjacent residential neighborhood to the west. And there were some things with the lighting, with the loading dock area. Site lighting, we have very strict requirements in the town. We don't have a dark skies ordinance, but we have basically an anti-glare ordinance where the lights have to not to really only illuminate the target, whatever they're trying to illuminate. So we do, I think, a good job with site lighting, landscaping. We do, I think, a very good job with that. We have buffer strip requirements in many cases where you have a commercial almost every month at the VRRB, we look at monument signs and people that are adding tenant panels to monument signs to make sure that they're legible, they're compatible. We look at wall signs in multiple tenant complexes to try to make sure that there's some, flow to the sign, some consistency, so that you don't have a box sign adjacent to, an exposed neon sign and then another radically different sign beside it. So there's a lot of things that we do currently and do well. The real question, is are our current provisions adequate? Do these need to be modified, and if so, how? What, in your all's opinion, makes a building attractive or inviting? What makes a site attractive or inviting? Like when you're traveling, like David mentioned earlier, what is it about a community, when you drive into it, you're just like, wow, this is neat. There's something about this place I really like. I'd like to maybe eat here, maybe spend the night here, walk around, spend some money in this town. Those are the kind of things I think we want to kind of solicit from you all tonight, try to get some feeling on. Are there things that we need to do imperative to more directly promote a certain desired built environment? With that, if y'all have any comments or questions, I'd be glad to answer them. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Gary.
One incident out of it brings it home a little bit. In recent time, like back in the ISO area or something like that. But recent time, Costco had an opportunity to visit some friends at Costco for the capability. My son lives in Costco one Saturday. And I knew it was coming up on our agenda. And I thought, I hadn't been in one, I hadn't really seen one. Interstate or something like that. So, very interested to go in and kind of pay attention to it. I was very impressed with the fact that it didn't look like a warehouse. Same for some of the places that typical simply particular. And well, this might be a real opportunity. Then when we got down to the review part, and started looking at what the middle was, that even though we could enhance this and do that, I knew if we get a quotation from Costco and asked me about, well, he was very familiar with the store I was talking about. His response to the question about why aren't you doing it here was, because you don't require it. Short and simple, right to the point. And I just don't want to see, there could have been a lot more enhancement with what that is, when corner signature interest in the town, than what it is. And so I guess that's, I'm vitally interested in doing something to increase the visual acceptability of the particular buildings.
I would agree with that. I had a chance to see one here in Charleston, South Carolina, a couple of years ago in Costco. Rick Stone looked fantastic, didn't even know it was Costco, and realized that similar story here, they'll build whatever the specs are, and they're such an important entranceway to the town like that is, that location. And I think it just provides a sense of community. You have some standards in line and emphasize some things that people come up with. The challenge, of course, is subjectivity. 10 people lined up, can you get any consensus on what people like and don't like? So that's the tough thing.
I think it's nice that we have enough nice buildings that we can look at now to draw from. And certainly, we're going to want to try and stay somewhat consistent with what we already have, so that we're not going in a totally different direction. My concern with anything that you do is, when will it look dated? And that's one of those things, if you can keep it looking classic and clean, it doesn't get dated. But that, that's subjective too. What we think now is contemporary nice, in 10 years, we'll have what we're thinking.
Yeah.
One of the things that I noticed in the photos that really stood out to me was like the sidewalks, because sometimes the sidewalks, I think, add
historically have done, and what a lot of newer buildings have done is they're closer to the road.
Yeah.
Sidewalks, you're more inclined to walk through past the store and look at the windows as you're moving on to somewhere else. I think parking looked like a lot of people were pushing parking to the backside. So it's just closer to the road a little bit, maybe not a lot of them are really tall structures, other than the last one, which, but that seemed appealing, you know, in that sense. It's a walkable community.
And the focus is more on the building rather than the sea of asphalt you're looking at from the street.
You know, David had mentioned earlier, and I know it's been a long time since we did this, but the design standards we put in place for that town center district, when we went through this process a couple of years ago, I think that really would be a great place to start.
Yeah, those are very good.
Yeah, and there was a lot in there. The concerns that came up after the fact, and as we got to the point of voting on it, was the one gentleman came in was, you know, more than vocal about his concern with us taking out anything related to metal, because, and he did a good job. I mean, his method maybe left a little bit to be desired, but he had a good message in the sense that there's a variety of different metal. You know, most people hear metal buildings, you think of the standard metal siding like we saw on the Players building there. But there are different types of that. Like anything within our community, there will always be new standards that come out and new methods that come out that we can evolve this. But I think if we went back to, and again, I know not everybody in here had the opportunity to see it, but if we went back to the starting point of the town center district, that would be a great place, because everything that everybody's mentioned so far is in there.
Yeah, we incorporated a lot of the elements in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very good.
And we didn't do it just overnight.
No.
All of that went through a lot of discussion.
Yeah.
So I guess the question with that is, would you want to see that expand into the other commercial districts?
I would personally, Gary, you know, quite frankly, I think if you took a poll throughout our community, I think most people think we already have design standards.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And
We get a lot done.
Yeah.
Despite us.
And if you look at what we put into that town center district, it incorporates just about everything that has been discussed here in the previous meetings. Now, that doesn't mean it can't be enhanced a little bit, you know, maybe we need to revisit some of the metal siding. I use that term very generically, and I don't know how you narrow that down a little bit, maybe that needs to be revisited. But if you look at the buildings, and you know, Mark mentioned one in particular I know gets a lot of good press, is the Eagles building, you know, the Kroger building gets a lot of good press. Those are in there. And we were just damn lucky that those folks designed it that way. And what's a great opportunity for our community, you know, something you mentioned earlier is when people pull off the interstate, do they want to stay in the community? I had the good fortune last week to spend a couple days in Overland Park, Kansas, and I'm sure others in this room have been there. You wanted to stay there. I came back and I was telling my son about it. I said, you know, it's kind of like Farragut on steroids. And you know, when you come back to our community after being gone for a while, it overwhelms you. You go, man, this is a great place. You want to stay in the town of Farragut. So it's a beautiful place. But I'm not sure that, and again, I know everybody hasn't seen it, but there was so much work that went into that. I would start from that and just polish it a little bit on the edges.
One of the components I think that we built into that was the use of brick in a lot of the construction, a lot of the elements of that construction. We have a lot of areas in town now, Parkside, Dangle's building, that uses a lot of the ephes and a lot of the stucco type facades. I've heard the building guys call them the lick and stick, where you have the faux brick and they put it on there. So I think, in my mind, what we're trying to pull out of this workshop is, are we looking at doing areas in construction of 100% brick facades, different building materials on that facade? You know, do you want to incorporate stucco? Do we want to keep allowing that type of material? Are we looking for a certain era of construction? If you look at some of the pictures on the survey, you can see that there were different eras in there that we put in, so we could kind of gauge what the thought was of this group here. So I think that's probably, we need to discuss that a little bit, the type of building materials.
Do you happen to have any pictures? you know, one of the main communities that we really looked at when we developed that town center district was Swanee, Georgia. And I don't know if you have any pictures readily available, but I think that might give folks a look. You know, it was, one of the pictures in there was Renaissance, and it doesn't have the changes in elevation that we have in the town center district, but it pretty much incorporates everything else. And you know, Renaissance is one of those areas, I really give Nick and Noah great credit. I mean, that's a timeless look. That thing's gonna look as good 30 years from now as it does today. And if we had some of those pictures with Swanee to show everybody, I think that would really give them that visual, because they have a good mixture of the different materials and mixing it up a little bit that really looked attractive.
I think one thing we want to avoid is that building, the corner of Parkside Drive and Capitol Station.
Where the yogurt shop is.
Oh,
The modern look and feel. I mean, that's the question, is the group look modern? Does that matter? Yeah, traditional?
You mean where Einstein's is?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm a big fan of that building.
I think what's great about it is that they use different architectural sort of materials, which may give it some interest anyway. So I don't have a problem with it.
I think we need to be careful about, like you're saying, if the idea, I'm not sure, maybe I misheard you, Gary, getting rid of stucco or not. I think we need to make sure we have a mix of materials that blend well together, because otherwise we end up starting to look too homogeneous.
Well, maybe it's something we want to build into the districts, use it by the town center district, where maybe we incorporate all the elements we already have in the district, 100% brick, stuff like that. In the commercial districts by intensity, maybe we pull some of the other elements in and out of there, and so we don't have that cookie cutter commercial district. So I think that's what we need to do, is figure out what materials we want, and then where do we want to have those materials.
Are the standards
I
going to
think
be
if we're talking
enforced
about
to the buildings that are
materials,
currently existing?
no,
I'm
all
sorry?
brick, all-
Just new buildings or
I'm not much in favor of that sort of thing, all brick, because there are many materials that are building material today that can be used to give much more character to buildings. And when we say steel, it may not be, it may be steel, but it may be,
Limestone's a good thing, and
no,
we use a lot of limestone.
different factions that don't even look like steel.
Yeah.
So, and limestone,
Yes.
blocks, all those different things you can use.
When we did the BD-4 district last year, we actually took some elements out of the town center district architecturally and kind of incorporated into the new BD-4, which does have some fairly strict, not quite as detailed as the town center district, but does have some pretty strict guidelines as percentage of brick. But it became pretty apparent that the common denominator was brick. And we even got into a little bit more detail about the color of brick. So it was pretty unanimous. Red brick, the traditional red brick, because we didn't want to get too carried away. Next thing you know, we have purple, yellow polka dot bricks. But but I do. I think that the town center district would be a great starting place. One of the things that we struggled if we were trying just to apply it to a BD-4, another commercial district, is there was some things in there we talked about storefront that we all really desired in the town center district that was not really applicable to more of an office style building. I think it's a great place to start because it does talk about a lot of the details in the Cornish. Personally, I'd like to see it go towards something that is fairly objective, that an applicant could come in from outside and they could grab a document from the town or download it off of our website and have with 90% certainty, okay, this is what I think the VRRB and the Planning Commission would approve. Even though I've been on architectural review committees on homeowners associations, and there's so much power given to those architectural review committees, and a lot of it's because the power that I put in there when I drew up the covenants restrictions, but it was really kind of dangerous sometimes. We really got into disagreements about what constituted that particular traditional style architecture. And we had somebody that came along with Frank Lloyd Wright, in architecture, he goes, this architecture's been around for 100 years, it's a prairie style architecture, and I couldn't argue with him. I never really thought of that. So, but I guess what my thought is to keep
the town of Farragut from getting a black eye over some big controversial issue with architecture is if we try to create something that a layman can look at and say, okay, it's 75% brick or 100% brick, and it has cornice details and some window details, and when you have so many X number of feet of horizontal and vertical walls, and maybe you gotta have a break in either color or the banding and do some things like that. But I think it does need to be fairly objective.
Let me suggest one thing, and that is, I think we ought to have an idea of what we absolutely don't want. And I'll give an example. Does anybody remember Hollywood View?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Remember what?
Hideous.
It was terrible.
And I told people, you know, if you think we're straight, look at that building.
And remember Checkers before that? Anybody remember the Checkers 20 years ago?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a hideous little building.
But you can look around and see a lot of examples of what we don't want. In fact, we're building one in Crooked Creek right now, a Chinese restaurant that's gonna be ugly. But we don't have any standards. If we did, they wouldn't be building that building the way it's gonna look, I guarantee you.
I remember when that came up and everybody was concerned and there was really nothing you could do about it.
No.
I think something that Mark picked up on, I think proportions. Proportions are a big thing, and I think that there are probably some guidelines that could be used for traditional architecture that has to do with proportions that would address some of these things when you get into this real postmodern, contemporary, unique architecture. They kind of throw up the proportions and the scales of what historically has been done. They kind of throw it out the window, figuratively and technically, completely speaking. But and so I think that there could be some ways that we could address the kind of scale and proportion without necessarily dictating somebody that you have to build this, and it has to be historic looking, turn of the century, and which I personally love. I love the idea the 4-story building is very historic. That's what my client wanted. They wanted something that looked like it had been there for 200 years, and it's brick and limestone, and it's but that may not necessarily be the theme that we want to push on everybody. It may be something, a design element that we may want to incorporate. It may want to give somebody kind of some different options, option A, option B, option C. But again, I do kind of go back to brick. That brick seems to be an element that it'll kind of be interesting to see. I guess Gary's going to do the survey results. Is somebody going to go through the survey results?
Yeah,
I can see
we'll
them on
talk
there. I
about
just can't
it.
remember which picture goes what. And so I think, but again, like Mark said, you can't just say, well, just throw brick on it and it's all good. That there are some other things that you could do that again, if we're going to address this, we might as well holistically address it and try to come up with some things. And I think it's important, what Ralph said, to look at things that have really been a thorn in our side over the years, and we can incorporate some language in there to try to address some of those things. Because eventually, some of those buildings, whether it's Costco or somebody else, eventually those buildings will get renovated. Usually those big boxes have a 15 to 20 year life before they do renovations. And so maybe we can catch it on the next go around and try to incorporate some design elements that is more kind of what we're thinking.
We gotta watch what we're doing, because we're getting too restrictive on what we're trying to do, because there's so much that changes over time of taste and desires of the people who want to shop in certain places. And so, I think we need to have these sort of basic guidelines without being overly restrictive and trying to design what we want the town to look like, because that doesn't, I've heard a lot of people talk about the old time, town square. Those don't really work. They work sort of historically. You see a lot of communities in the state of Tennessee where you see travel on these highways, and the crossroads where this was a town square. And those are great places, but you can look at them, they're all struggling, versus now the interstate system bypasses us, and so you're trying to draw people out, but it's got to be a good experience and a nice place to be, but you can't tie yourself too much to the past and restrict your future. And I think what the mayor said too is that we need to look at what we haven't liked and model ourselves more towards being supportive of what we would like to be, but not blocking ourselves out design-wise.
The negatives seem to bend themselves into the categories of what you don't like about extremes in these categories, like color or shape. When I think about shape and lighting extremes, first thing that pops in my mind is fireworks building.
Talking proportion
Between-
scale.
Between proportion, scale, and blockiness and lighting, I mean, and design it just, screen. It's in these categories of color, shape, you think of generic categories, it's the extremes and seem to really catch us. Because within that family, there are things that are very pleasing and pleasing combinations.
And there's no question we've done well, and it's largely without being too strict. But that means that people who are building the things that look good have some taste, and they want to put the taste into it. And there's no question that people like what it looks like either. We still have some ragged edges, and we can fix that. I had to go to my dentist today. He lives in Farragut, offices in Farragut. Talked about how well Farragut is doing. And, he said he has a friend who always calls Farragut the promised land. And I take that as a compliment.
Well, if any of you have never been to Sugar Land, Texas, go on the website and look at pictures of that place. It's one of those wow communities. It's like, oh my gosh, everything looks beautiful. It's not all the same, but it's all beautiful. And this used to be a little hole in the wall, sugar cane factory, and I mean, it is just unbelievable what they've done with that place. I mean, anyone would want to live there if they lived in that Houston area.
It took them a while to do it, it's gonna take us a while.
Yeah, it's
We'll get there.
beautiful.
Can we go back to a comment that David made a second ago, and just, I would like to get everybody's kind of thoughts on this. You mentioned being too restrictive, and so, I guess what I'd like to know is, what do you think is going too far in telling somebody that they have to make their building look a certain way?
Depends on who the person is.
Well, we have to treat everybody, so what I'm trying to do is get at, is there something we could tell a developer of their building that you think would be like, we probably shouldn't be getting into that, we should let them decide that?
Well, I mean, we've had a lot of discussion about traditional strip center development, which is parking lot in front, is sitting back 300 feet off the road. And is it restricted to ask somebody to develop a building closer to the road, to have more glass, to have more walkable frontage, and to move the parking behind it? I don't know the answer to that, so Noah would know better than I do. My concern is after a lot of this discussion over the years is that a lot of people had this conception that we were gonna build a town center that was like the town square in Loudon. And they're struggling because it doesn't really work. Obviously it's an older area, it's not enough parking, it's harder to make that work commercially and viable commercial real estate. So, my comment was, I don't know the answer, I'm scared we're gonna box ourselves in and nobody doesn't wanna do anything here. But at the same time, as being a resident here, a business owner here, I want it to be attractive, I want it to be quality. And, the economics drive a lot of that because, as I talk to, if we go to ICSC, talk to these people, all of a sudden we're talking about, I wanna get the biggest building I can on the smallest spot I got, the amount of parking I need. That means I want all asphalt, I want a building that fits this, and I wanna build that in because it's cheap. That's what happened with Costco. But we've seen designs for Costco in other communities. I think we saw a picture of one in Houston, both of us stopped and went, holy cow, that's a Costco? And they wanted to be there. So,
I think our demographics are very special. And the retailers, and whether it be a developer that wants to do another big multifamily apartments, which is kind of probably what I see on the horizon soonest that I'd like for this to be applicable to, what we're working on today. But I think those demographics really speak for themselves. So kind of what we talked about Costco is if they determine that their business model works in the town of Farragut, $50,000 or $100,000 or $200,000 in the big scheme of things on a store that does $100 million a year in sales, it just doesn't really make any difference to them. That they've already made the conscious effort to come here. And I'm not saying go all out and dictate the color of the windowsills and make them do brick sidewalks, even though I love brick sidewalks and we're doing a brick parking lot right now. I think there can be somewhere that we can start incorporating some of these things. We kind of started with I'll call it the anti-metal ordinance. And that was kind of a step in the right direction. Then we kind of stepped back, and the board made all of them step back, and Bob, who's not here, which I wish he was here, kind of had a hard time getting their arms around it. But I think that if we can incorporate some of these things, but also try not to create any Pandora boxes that is going to create a lot of hardship for staff and bad PR for the town, and also help keep the EDC happy and the business community happy. But I do think that there are people that are really surprised that we don't have these. They just assume, again, I can't remember if Mark said it or David said, they just assume we already have it. And so we're not going to shock anybody. We're not going to, a big apartment developer that wants to come in and build 200 units, they're going to assume that we have it. And if we want them to do brick instead of a little bit of brick and mostly vinyl siding, they'll be happy to do it because the numbers are already justified in being here.
Did they show you, when the guy came in and was talking about metal siding, did he show you examples of metal siding buildings that?
He had a variety of, the challenge there was, I think we were maybe a little too generic in defining what metal was. Again, most
percentage too.
Yeah.
Percentage, so well, you got window trim made out of metal, then how does that percentage of door, how does that figure into the, there was a lot of discussion about
Yeah,
percentage.
he had some legitimate arguments. Again, I thought his method left a little bit to be desired. He had some legitimate arguments. And finding that balance in there. For example, if you look at the Farragut Lawn Tractor, that's a good looking building. I don't think anybody would drive by and say, well, that building doesn't fit in our community, and it's a nice looking building. But if you take a step back, you go, there's a fair amount of metal on that building. But I have no problem with that building. It's a good looking building, and they found the balance in there, and that's finding the right percentage in the mix. But to answer your question, yes, he had some good pictures of metal used in a way that I had not seen before. Some of it was down, I think, at the University of Tennessee in one of their buildings. He was brought to our attention.
It showed the Mercedes-Benz dealership. It's on Parkside Drive.
Yeah, that's right.
Picture was the metal front facade to it. It's got a huge building. It's mostly stucco. But so the ordinance wouldn't have, I don't think, would have allowed that ordinance would have allowed that building to take place here in Farragut. I think the idea was the type of metal, and it was more of a shiny, almost like a mirror approach to it, rather than the typical siding that you see.
It really will be no different than what we deal with on the planning commission today, where somebody comes up with a new method. It doesn't mean we can't tighten things up or loosen things up, or just change things in general when it's the right time.
That's my key, or you said, is flexibility.
Yeah.
You gotta be flexible with the times as things change and as, our community's tastes change. We've gotta be able to adapt to that, and it can't be just all rigid and, framed around what a lot of our history was and what we all think was attractive, but, 30, 40 years from now, 20 years from now, things change. I'm not saying that, just because everybody likes pink, that all the buildings need to be pink, but,
I think the difference is, David, I think I'm going to use different words, but I think this is what you're saying, is that we don't want to become overly restrictive, but we do want to set boundaries for our community. And quite frankly, I would think from Noah's perspective as a developer, in many cases it's embraced because people go, hey, at least now I know kind of because you want to fit into a community. If you look at a lot of the businesses today, even McDonald's, I mean, you compare McDonald's today, what they're doing, they're not even remotely close to what they were 5 years ago. And so every major business, as I think, David made the comment earlier in regards to Helen George, but every major business, if they come to an area they want to be, they're going to do what that community asks them to do. And Noah stated this is a special place. It is a very special place.
What's interesting about McDonald's to me is that building has always been part of their brand. And they've always
John, whatever we pick, or whatever we decide, wouldn't it be reviewed over a certain amount of time, just like our 25-year plan is going to get reviewed and possibly altered? I imagine whatever we pick here would end up, we would be able to go back and revisit from time to time.
Most often that happens when there's an applicant. If there's an applicant that suggests a text amendment, and I'm not talking historically speaking, when we get into changing any text in our municipal code, unless it's something that came out of a retreat that the board made aldermen had, but typically one has to do with the zoning districts and the VRB. Usually it's typically it's an applicant that said, hey, I kind of have this idea. What do you think about this? Well, no, you can't do that, but we never thought about that. That's a pretty good idea. Maybe it's a good candidate for a text applicant or a text application to go through, and obviously depending on how it would be routed through the VRB to the planning commission and end up with the board mayor and alderman. But that's kind of how, and that system seems to work pretty good.
But it works on a positive way, because when you're coming forward and saying, I want to do this, and it's really a positive adaptation, like what y'all done at a Renaissance, it makes sort of sense, and you work through the process, and it's worth your time, hopefully, and your client's time to go through that. But we get a lot of situations where people go, they're skating under the wire, going, oh, I see where the wire is, I'm going under it, which is sort of what we have with Costco. So you've got this scale, and how do you get the dialogue going to say, hey, it fits what the guidelines are now, but where you're now seeing you're doing something a little bit different. How do we adapt to drive them in a more positive way? It's hard.
Sherman's, Texas, or wherever, and you see something that maybe we left out, we can always say, well, it could be a staff-initiated change, and then see what kind of feedback and pulse that the VRB and the board and the planning commission all have on it. But I think
The main reason I asked that question is that there's gonna come a point in time when we put standards in place that you're gonna have something come before you that you're gonna have to say to them, I'm sorry, this doesn't fit what we're looking for. And coming from a community that has extremely strict standards of commercial development, multifamily, you name it, we said that a lot more often than you think you're gonna say it. If you stick to your guns and you want a certain look and feel in your community. Now, if you're willing to vary off of that, that's fine. I think you just gotta be able to know what it is, that vision that you're trying to create. And I think that's why we're trying to get a sense for the design element of it. What is this body, all of our bodies here today, interested in seeing how far you'd like to go with that design element. I mean, again, I think I've heard a little bit of objectivity, try to keep it as objective as possible so that there's not a lot of subjectivity, and we can certainly try to do that as best we can. And I heard a little bit about people talking about not making everything look the same. I think one way you do that is, and many times in our ordinances we have now, we talk about being compatible with the area. And so if you have kind of the first guy that goes in with a certain look and feel to that building in a certain development area, that may be what you pull off of. And you tell another applicant down the road, well, hey, you need to at least, you don't have to look the same, but you may want to have the same color brick, or you may want to have the same kind of lines in the building that look different with a different color, that type of thing. You can go that far is what I'm saying. So again, trying to just keep the discussion going. That's why I wanted to know kind of where, it's hard to tell, because we don't have anything in front of you right now to say, here's what the ordinance is, here's what the standards say. But you are gonna have to make those decisions down the road. And what we need to do as staff is just to know what your, how strongly you feel about it. That's really what it comes down to. How strongly the planning commission, the board, the VRB feel about these certain things will help us know going forward how we're going to enact anything that we come up with.
One of the things you have to do is give them enough broad suggestions or guidelines, whatever, but give them enough leeway so that they can find a way to stay within those terms. And if you do that, I think, and
criticisms about our processes have been very rigid. And there needs to be a flow of information, needs to come from staff, lower level staff, upper level staff, needs to go through the committees to say, hey, somebody's approaching us about this, and are we flexible about it, or are we not? Does it fit what we envision for this community, the long term? And so we gotta have dialogue and have the sense as developers come, or people want to do business here, that, hey, this is what I'm looking at. Well, I don't have a problem telling people that, we have standards, and it costs more money to do business in this community, but our demographics drive why they want to be here. And so we've got standards. There's no problem with that, but it's making sure we have communication through the process to say, this is why we don't like, we don't need to close the door on everybody. We just need to have that dialogue to say, hey, things are changing, and we need that flow of information that would help us understand that times change, and maybe we need to change.
Well, I'm gonna go back to something I said earlier. I would really encourage us to start with the town center district. I think that's a great place to start. It will create opportunity for conversation when something doesn't fit. We need to make sure we continue the culture that has developed over the last few years of being willing to have the conversation. And when a circumstance comes up, like Noah mentioned, time is money in many cases. And collectively, all the boards in this room need to be willing to be called upon on short notice on occasion, and we need to have a meeting off cycle to knock things out. And we've had to do that in a couple cases to make sure people met their timeline. And I think if we have if there's a perception in our community that we're willing to work with folks, and I think it is changing, a lot of the major concerns will go away. And we can polish this thing, but right now we're at a great handicap because there's no need to have a conversation. People can do what they want, and then we can complain afterwards, and then it's too late. And so I don't want to be overly restrictive. I don't want that word to be out there, but we do need to have a place to start to create the conversation, because I tell you, this group could meet for the next 12 months, and we're still not going to get to the end zone.
Gary, do you want to go ahead and talk about the visual
Yeah.
survey results?
Two of the things that we really looked at when we were doing the town center was lighting and landscaping. And I think those are two things that really, really enhance, like your buildings. And I think that's one of the things we really want when we have new buildings in our town, to make sure that we have the right kind of lighting and the right kind of landscaping.
One thing about Costco, they may have built an ugly steel building, but they got great landscaping.
Yeah.
If you've ever really sat back and looked at the landscape, I mean, they really, we picked on Costco tonight, I just thought, but there's one thing that I'm real proud of what they did with their landscaping, because they really went above and beyond. And I obviously worked with Mark and staff, and the VRRB worked with that, but it's really pretty impressive. So when you come, it does de-emphasize an ugly building. Landscaping can really do
And the lighting,
wonderful
lighting
things.
too, at night if you go by there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more like 100%.
I don't want to beat you guys to death with going through these. The results of the survey, unfortunately didn't print the picture, and I didn't get a chance to really analyze these. I can either put it together and send it to you, or I can sit down and go through the survey again.
I don't think there's only 25 of them. I think we can skip.
You guys want to go through?
I'd like to see if there's common ground.
Okay. And also I printed out, Mark put together a kind of a little dictionary of terms, architectural terms, some pictures on the back. And there were things in there that I didn't know about, so I thought it might be handy to have that. You guys can take those with you.
One little item, but maybe, I don't think we have this in town, maybe we get no expense. But one of the things, unfortunately hasn't come up often, but it has come up in our county, is after we approve the original color of the building, if it's sold 5 years later, the new owners can paint it in any color they want. We need to fix that.
Yeah, Mark, can we regulate color?
Yeah, it could fall under the draft architectural design. Like I mentioned earlier, it is allowed in the state.
Oh, you printed it out. Oh.
You have to be a little careful with the state's reference. You can take it to the extreme where you can be challenged legally and not lose. But if you have it, some flexibility and you don't overreach, then yes, you could address it.
you guys, when you took the survey, if you noticed, I just put P1 for photo ones, so it would correspond with the question, so as we're going along in this. The P1 in the top left corner don't correspond with the first bar chart here. And this just, if you look at the bar, it just gives the average, so this one got an average weight, it looks like 7.5, it's got the distribution down below, with 17% going with most desirable. If you have any questions about the stuff or a comment, just shout it out, stop me, or whatever.
That I don't like. Looks like wild west.
So P2, the average distribution of 4. Looks like most people are neutral on this one.
I like stonework, I didn't see this in it, because that's some stonework,
Yeah.
that's not stonework. Really, this looks like a long.
Pretty unanimous on that one.
Yeah, this one didn't do very well.
That's pretty easy.
Yeah, it's not very. This one I thought was interesting, because when you first look at it, it looks like it's under construction, but it's not.
I think that was scaffolding on the outside.
Yeah, it does.
It's a 7-Eleven.
I mean, for a 7-Eleven, it's pretty good.
It looks like Beijing.
I don't know where this is at.
Does it look like Beijing?
Wow, that was unanimous too.
Well, you know, we were talking about scale and proportion. That's the issue with that Cornish. If you could change the color, I'll show the checkerboard, but the scale is just way out of whack.
It's gotta be Miami or something.
That's kind of one thing.
A little hard declaration going on there. So P5, this one, 7.5 looks like. The, yeah, did pretty well. And this obviously has a lot of architectural elements in it that I think we're talking about. P6, same thing, 7.25 looks like. This is.
You gotta go to the top of this.
At the bottom.
Let me get Gary some technical assistance classes.
He snuck in.
But if you get next, go to the top.
We lost P7.
Wow. Missed a day.
7, 8, 9, 10.
We just skipped to 11.
Let's go to 11.
All right, Survey Monkey. Do what you paid for. So we got a 7 on this one did pretty well. And I like this one because you can't really see it on the screen, but it's got, looks like it's got a lot of different elements in it, the wood, a lot of glass, the gooseneck lighting, the perpendicular signage. But I can see that in Farragut.
Something that appeals to me on that is, and it's real historical, you see it in a lot of downtowns, is you see how the front door is recessed into the building? And nowadays we just use canvas awnings to try to, if somebody wants to get into the building without getting wet, or at least stand at the door. But I think it's a real neat element of older buildings to have the door kind of recessed into an alcove. I'm not sure what the architectural theme is with that, or what, I'm sure there's a name for it, but it's just kind of something interesting to point out.
So is that something that's, people can see in Farragut?
It's hard to see, basically these are all, road counties, or we've got cross streets.
Yeah.
So that's what.
It's hard to see what that on the block, yeah.
Right now.
And that's just.
You're gonna have to know, like, when you're doing something in the future, you gotta have development and strong. God,
Can't be
drastically different, unless you're intending to demolish the whole area.
So I think this is a good example of probably what we don't want. That's that lick and stick I was talking about, this brick facade. And this is all that ethos. Yeah, just, is that what it is? Stuff that
We got plenty of that already.
It wouldn't be so bad if it was landscape.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I think, one of the things.
Yeah, it looks like we're ready to get rid of it.
Yeah, to be fair to the picture, it's,
Yeah.
it looks like you're getting ready to put it in. Would this be fair? It did pretty well.
Institutional.
Yeah.
We got a 6.82.
I think that's limestone, no?
No, I think that might be metal. Or it might be an ethos with the color in it. It just, the color looks too blue for limestone, even a man-made limestone. It is kind of interesting how kind of polarizing this one was though. This is one of the few that I kind of marked 2 circles on both ends. We had a group that liked it, and a group that didn't like it.
It's just kind of blah.
Yeah, it's like,
It looks like probably some sort of industrial park, which would be bad. Very festive. A lot of neutrals on this one. I mean, I like the brick design. What's that?
Not much going on above that.
Now,
Now, that's one that maybe if you put the stuff for planters instead of flies or
Yeah.
something, that would have broken that up and maybe something.
At the top, yeah.
it's different from the buildings that are next to it, so it's got some.
it probably is an all-brick building that they actually troweled on a scratch coat on. A lot of times they would do that when the brick was deteriorating, instead of replacing it, they would just trowel on a masonry, what they call a scratch coat, which is more of a true hard stucco.
So there's probably brick.
Probably is brick back there behind on the old building like that. Yeah.
A lot of neutrals, less desirable on this. I think architecturally it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Y'all like the different, if you go back down here, do you like the different styles of roof line next to each other like that?
I like breaking it up.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily, I'm not really excited about the hacienda style on the right, or the Mexican, but I like breaking it up, vertically breaking it up. Well, which, I mean, if you look at Kroger and Costco, some of those have done, not Costco, but Ingles have kind of done that, where they'll kind of break it up in different kind of push-pull in both in height and depth. And I think that's what creates some kind of visual interest.
You've got different textures, but you've got totally different designs between each building.
Yeah.
I also think the signage is sort of, I don't know.
Yeah.
Takes
Well,
away from
really,
it.
there's no landscaping, there's no light, I mean, I think it could be really nice, the colors a little bizarre.
It's busy.
Yeah.
You know what, I guess that orange color, Mark and I, and some of us over the years, we've come up about earth tones, instead of trying to dictate particular colors. And would you say that falls in an earth tone? Okay, that's what I'm saying if we.
Tennessee mud, it's Tennessee mud. What do you
Well,
want?
Depends on what part of the earth you're on.
well, that's true. I guess I'm just trying to stimulate some thought as we're thinking about colors, as we wordsmith this into something. We gotta be, is earth tones a good thing to use, or maybe a dangerous thing to use?
Well, this is a good example of how, different architecture is gonna label your communities. Obviously, a southwest community, that's
Right.
exactly the look
And
that.
that may be the issues, because look at the different colors that are used in combination, so that may be more of an objection to
probably a real legitimate earth tone for them.
I've seen quite that color.
Hell, you're right. Tennessee clay.
So this didn't do too well. Nice landscape. I don't know what that building is.
Gordon Biersch. Restaurant.
Brewing company? Is that what it is?
Restaurant.
Is it?
I don't know. I've seen them different places.
There's a palm tree right there.
What I did like about that was
Maybe
the
Florida, Vegas, or
garden, park area and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good landscape.
You can see the brew pub in the left corner.
Oh, the tower.
there is one of those.
This one's right down the middle. Yeah, it doesn't appear.
Each of the boxes.
A lot of, low to neutral in this. You do very well in this.
This one reminds me of Jersey, that's
Yeah.
why.
I like the wide sidewalk and the landscaping there. I think that's really neat.
But this has a lot of different, really cool architectural options. That'd be a neat little residential.
Limited spaces.
Yeah.
But it is,
Probably.
got too much of it. It's neat when you have occasional ones, but you
Yeah.
have all different shapes of it out.
That probably is a Jersey building.
So that's starting to improve, that's good.
This scored pretty low too. Not bad.
What do people not like about this picture? Curious.
Another shopping
True, but I mean, you know, what, I think what Mark talked about earlier, you got insets, you got different elevations, changes.
For what it is, I like it.
I think what's so hard with the big box is making it look like what Kroger has done and what Ingles did, is making it look not so big. Or making it feel more inviting. And that
So-
just,
It's pretty monocolor.
yeah.
I think the color of the brick, the color has a lot to do with it, the stuff going on top.
This,
For me, it's not what's in the picture. It's what I'm seeing right there is all of a sudden I see a big parking lot in front of it. And that's what it defines for me. I mean, you know,
that's what's tough about these surveys.
overwhelming negative.
It's hard to know why.
If you look at the entire picture,
Stuck on the.
Well, it's, you know, it is tough, you're right, but you've got different roof, what's interesting about this is you've got different roof lines,
Yeah.
you've got different elevation changes, you've got different, you know, fronts to the buildings, or some are out farther to the road, some are farther back. You've got neutral colors, we kind of talked about that a little bit. So it's got a lot of the elements that you would think people would like, but you're not scoring it very well, so that's,
But you know,
We're
if
trying to
this
get
came to, as a plan, you may not feel as strongly as you see up in the picture. I don't know why.
Actually, I think if the trees were green, it would be better favorable, because you have a contrast.
That's true.
I mean,
Maybe
a lot of
let's
things.
need to put evergreen in front of it.
What colors do most people like? That's another part of it. The modern ones.
So what if this were 100% brick? If that were all that manufactured ethos is right there, if that were all brick, would that be different?
That's the brick, would make a huge difference on that building.
Like a nice red brick.
Maybe some banding or something, it's just kind of a lot of beige.
If they would have taken something on that building on the left, see how you just see that tall, bland wall? If they would have put something visual there, it would have broken it up, would look better, I think.
Different roof line?
No, a different sideline.
Kind of on the corner, that little corner block, right behind the street light.
Yeah, right behind,
Yeah.
directly
Behind the middle
behind.
street light.
Middle.
Middle, there you go, right there.
There.
Yeah, that's,
That needs something there to break the monotony of
it's
the
just a
building.
blank wall.
Maybe a faux wall or a faux window?
Anything. Tree, window,
A jumbotron.
a burrow.
See, here's one, because I like it, but I hate that building material. I like the setup. It's kind of hard to tell on here. That actually just didn't do too bad.
Not the same as last
Gary
year.
loves
Gary,
that.
we're saying with the Starbucks.
Yeah, it's just, I'm drawing right to
Yeah,
that.
I know.
Starbucks.
Pavlovian response. Good. Yes.
I can't, it's hard to tell what the use of it too, this is like almost a auto use.
Right now.
What is it?
It's vacant right now. It's a new building.
You know what that is, Mark?
That's North Shore Town Center.
Is it?
Yeah, were all these pictures taken by the alder on this survey?
No.
What's that?
I was just wondering, you said that's North Shore Town Center?
Yeah, not all of them.
A lot of them shot off the internet.
Yeah, we
Where
just
is
pulled them
that?
off of Google.
North Shore Town Center.
So you loaded this deal? I thought this was like impartial, somebody else did the survey.
No. Did you take it?
Did we fail?
Did you take it?
Did we fail?
There's your answer, Gary.
This one, I think this is more of a, you kind of a district picture,
Well, so you can find
streetscape type of picture. Actually, you do that a little bit for this.
Would you picture Gary's car?
I don't like the automobiles parked in front of the stores,
You don't like that?
no.
Even the angle parking?
No, I don't like it, I think, put them behind the building.
Greenville, South Carolina, looks like that.
Well, it looks like a trial store, there's a tracks.
It does, yeah.
If that were,
It's not really used that, but get the heck out of here.
Takes away, you don't.
this is, we have a lot of this, obviously, so this is a good picture for us.
That's, in Parkside Drive, right?
No.
No, we didn't really, I don't think we brought it into the town.
Sort of looks like the one on Parkside Drive, doesn't it?
Very similar.
There's some parts of stuff, though, this is great.
Oh.
Both, we've been such a.
So this didn't look as bad.
Different roof lines.
Is that the old Kmart before down?
This is loaded.
So what's wrong with this?
Purvis had this as most desirable. I don't know why.
Couldn't imagine.
Yeah, so these last two didn't do too well, obviously.
Go back. Yeah.
Can you go back up?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
So we're 23 on this one, Don?
No, I don't like
A
it.
lot of neutrals on this.
I like that.
Park City.
Park City, yeah, that's it,
Park City.
Yeah.
It's got that shootout look.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Old set.
Part of the
Later, but.
So this really didn't do too well.
No.
that looks good. Looks tired. Well, those down there.
But it has to start, have you seen the common theme so far, Starbucks?
No liquor stores.
Gary, we got like the top two or
Gary.
three, that top 2 or 3 that were ranked high.
I like the first one the best, I think.
And then the one definitely ranked pretty high, that was over a 7.
Several, sevens.
5 ranked at 7, 6 ranked at 7. 7.
Yeah, that ranks high.
Which one?
6, there's on 6, over here. That one, right there.
Yeah, that was actually pretty high.
6, yes.
6 rated high, 5 rated high,
The supplements deals too.
It doesn't, you're right. Yeah, it doesn't want its own today.
rated high.
Yeah.
So it looks like a lot of facades and it's just broken up.
See, to me, that's kind of like, isn't that call it Williamsburg or?
Looks kind of Charleston, maybe Rainbow Road.
Our next one's 5. They like that.
No, that was it. I mean, what I'll do is I'll put this all together and send it to you, so you have the picture of the actual, I'll put a little chart in there so it's a little easy to read.
I think, probably from the discussion, not everybody can tell, this isn't easy. It's gonna be difficult. Some things you see in a picture, you think may be fitting what you're looking for, but then you realize it doesn't. So, again, we'll work very hard to get an RFP out here soon and get the right design professional in that can help glean all this information out of everybody and the public and the business community, developers, everybody that's out there, and try to come up with something that at least will give us a baseline. I think that's what I'm hearing, is we'd like to have some kind of baseline and then work our way up if that's what we need to do. So again, this process is gonna take some time. It's not gonna happen overnight. But we appreciate y'all being here tonight and helping us at least get some kind of ideas of how we need to start. Anybody have any other comments before we break up tonight?
Yeah. Go to the web and look up Copenhagen, Denmark. There's a famous row of buildings, right across from the port, I think. If you look up Copenhagen, they'll show you that picture, I guarantee you.
Is that it right there?
Yeah.
On the left, all the boats, that one's on?
Then we need a deep water port.
There we go, right there, oh my gosh.
We
We got it.
Thank y'all very much. Y'all have a very good night. Give us something else.
Give us the video, give out anything.
Our meeting, you know, been around 200 or 300 years. We're on.
Well,